What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're jumping in with another Destiny 2 video. This time actually we're going to talk about cut content, or should we say the original Destiny content, as of course over the years, Destiny 1 firstly was rebooted, and there were a significant number of changes between what Bungie were working on ahead of launch and the game that we actually got. That also plays into Destiny 2 because some of the content originally designed for Destiny 1 didn't actually make it into the game until D2, and across multiple expansions between both titles, various elements that have actually been in development for a very long period of time were kind of moved around and changed. Of course, that includes the major reboot for Destiny 1. So this is an article by the Game Post, rounding up a bunch of details that were released by Bresci on Reddit, who had a big dig through the files of a December 2013 Xbox 360 tech alpha build for Destiny 1. Obviously that was a very early alpha of the original game, and on top of things that we've learned since that time about the reboot for the game, this build actually contains a bunch of threads and details that link to the original version of Destiny 1. And it correlates with a lot of interesting things we've seen over the years. Firstly, in a 2013 Vidoc before Destiny 1 even released, there was footage of the EDZ, one of the intended destinations for D1. Ultimately though, of course, we didn't get that until Destiny 2 dropped many years later. On top of that, other elements like Io, which appears to have originally been part of Mars from Destiny 1, and the Pyramidion on Io was firstly built as a raid, but you see really interesting kind of elements of development, like the Crossroads map from Destiny 1, which was set on Mars. But when you look at the textures, the geometry, even things like the plant life, it's actually identical to Io from Destiny 2, but of course Io has a slightly different color palette, and you see crazy things like this, where on the Crossroads PvP map intro, in the background in the distance, is a structure that is essentially identical to Pyramidion, as well as that destination featuring those giant man cannons, as they're referred to, which ultimately we didn't really see a bunch of until we got Io in Destiny 2. Indeed, Pyramidion had been built as a Mars raid originally, so those are just quick examples, and the article here highlights that when Destiny launched in 2014, many players were confused by the story, with the narrative feeling hollow and disjointed. Then in 2015, we learned that the original story for Destiny 1 had been essentially completely rebooted just over a year before the launch of the original title. Threads related to this were actually found in that alpha build of Destiny 1 though, such as destinations where the Earth, Venus, Mars, Moon, and Dreadnought were listed, and Dreadnought's another component that we did actually see in trailers before D1 was even released. It didn't make it into the final cut for Destiny 1, but ended up being the key location for the Taken King. And looking more at key characters for the original story, of course the Ghost existed, but also a character called Crow. We now know who Crow is, of course. Then Osiris, Hecate, if I'm saying that name correctly, which was the original name for the Stranger. Then there is Rasputin and the Mask, who later became the Speaker, as well as Queen Mara Sov. And in the original story, we were sent by forces from the Last City to locate a hunter named Crow, who we would find on the Cosmodrome. That of course was cut, and later Crow evolved into Uldren Sov. But the intention for the original story is that Osiris and his assistant Hecate were helping to guide us through the story, as well as Rasputin, who was originally set to be an actual walking, talking exo controlled by a warmind, as opposed to purely being an AI. So our mission was essentially to find Rasputin, but upon arriving at the Cosmodrome bunker, the Seraphim Vault, the original story had us discover that Rasputin was missing and essentially had been captured by the Hive aboard the Dreadnought. And on the Dreadnought in Destiny 1 in the Trenchway area, there was this weird sort of warmindy looking structure. It never had a purpose in Destiny 1, but supposedly that is where Rasputin was actually going to be held captive aboard the Dreadnought destination. So obviously that whole story changed significantly. There are even renders of the early version of Rasputin, which may have influenced the Exo character more widely in the Destiny universe. And it's interesting because the destinations that we would visit as part of the Destiny campaign were actually pretty similar in the original story, but it's more that the story itself, as well as the key characters, were switched up significantly. Plus that early alpha build of Destiny 1 referenced a bunch of different strikes. Most of them we did actually get at the launch of Destiny, so there was the Den of Devils, Devil's Lair on Earth, the Nexus strike on Venus, and then Dust Palace on Mars, which I believe we actually ended up getting in the Taken King. But there was the Cerberus Vase strike on Mars, Summoning Pits on the Moon, and then the Crux, which was a Dreadnought strike featuring a Hive boss named Asaru, the Navigator, and that presumably was reworked into one of the Dreadnought strikes that we later got, perhaps the Darkblade or something like that. One of the biggest things from the original version of the game though, is that the first raid Bungie were working on was actually the Hive Mega Raid, which was built from sections of both Crota's End and the Kingsfall raid. So originally they were kind of smashed together together, and the intention was that that was going to be the first Destiny raid, but at some point in development they decided to pause that and instead worked on the Vault of Glass. There's an interesting suggestion here from Mythoclast on Twitter, but reportedly, that first Hive raid was actually developed by Luke Smith and a small team running on the Halo Reach engine as opposed to inside of the actual Destiny engine, and they used various different relics as kind of placeholders for Hive swords, such as gravity hammers, which is another interesting component of that development history. Obviously, later on, Bungie went ahead and focused on Vault of Glass instead, and then broke up Kingsfall, or the Hive raid, into different sections to instead make 2 raids. There's also a bunch of different PvP maps that have text threads inside of that alpha build as well. Many of them came out when D1 released, but there were others that we ended up getting later in Destiny 1's lifecycle. Things like Timekeeper, Sector 87, which is the PvP map that was in the wall of the last city, and then referencing the EDZ, reportedly this was in development as a Destiny 1 Comet DLC location, which eventually became the Taken King, so EDZ, for whatever reason, was totally cut from the game. We later got it in Destiny 2, but like we said, there's footage showing EDZ from before D1 even released, with the shard of the Traveler in the background, a strike set on an abandoned airport, and from the video footage here, we can see kind of castle structures, turrets and towers, which ultimately we didn't get in the Destiny 2 version for whatever reason. As for the finer details of the story specifically, obviously there are many things that we will never know about the original Destiny 1 story. But when we look at the content that we've got both across Destiny 1 and D2, it's absolutely wild to think just how many different components Bungie already had kind of spun up and had in the background. Even destinations like Europa were being worked on for many, many years before we finally got them. And it's really cool that you see elements like that Pyramidion being visible on Mars, given that Pyramidion reportedly was developed as a Mars raid. And again, if you look at Io back in Destiny 2, it's literally sections of Mars with a totally different color scheme. So again, it's even crazier to think that there were references in the files to many of these components in an alpha build for Destiny 1, which is now 11 or 12 years old nearly. But obviously having so much content in the vault, so to speak, at Bungie has partly enabled them to continue to release major expansions and big new destinations, right? Because they've been working on these things for so long. So there we go, guys. That is what I wanted to round up today. Just an interesting bit of conversation. I'll link the original threads down below as well. I know there are a lot of folks that would have loved to see the original cut of the Destiny 1 story, but in terms of getting any more details on it, chances are we'll simply never know. Share your thoughts in the comment section. If you've enjoyed the discussion today though, a rating really does help us out on the channel, and be sure as well to get subscribed for more content. But otherwise, I hope you guys have an awesome day.
I know what you're about to do. It's brave. There are enemies out here you would not believe. But they've never seen anything like you.